I just read The Giving Tree to my class and started sobbing at the end and wound up having 11 5-year-olds consoling me as I tried to stop crying. Where is the worst place you have burst into tears and what caused it? My senior year of high school, I was the personal assistant of my band director during my study hall period. The guy was kind of unpleasant, had a bad temper, and didn't like me a whole lot, but he appreciated the help, so I'd sit in his office and file paperwork, write out receipts, etc. Well, in November, my grandfather died very suddenly. We were close, and I was devastated, but I held up at school and soldiered on. In December, my grandmother fell in the garage, broke her hip and wound up in the hospital. In January, she fell in the hospital and hit her head, going into a coma. In February, my mother and her brothers made the difficult decision to take her off life support, and she died. At both my grandmother's and grandfather's funerals, they played a song called Flight to Jesus, which I had heard once before but didn't think I'd ever have to hear again, since I don't go to church. So one day, about 3 weeks after all this ended, I was sitting in band director's office rifling through paperwork, and he's listening to music on his computer, and an instrumental version of this song comes on. I don't immediately recognize it, but I do immediately start to cry inconsolably. Being a gruff, impersonal kind of guy, he has no freaking clue how to react to this, so he just sits there looking at me in despair while I sob it out of my system. And when I'm done he just tells me, "I know your car's out back, just go home. I'll write your excuse note." Still blubbering, I just walk the frick out. He was much nicer to me from that point until I graduated in May. I burst into tears in the middle of serving a customer once. I was really unhappy at my job and a few people kept harassing me, so that particular day I just totally lost it. The customer was a regular and he gave me a bunch of tissues and asked me what was wrong. I ended up just crying in the back for a bit then going home. Service jobs are some of the most stressful jobs out there, and they're made worse by people looking down on those who work them. Unfortunately you have to deal with lots of crappy people. I hope things have improved for you or you've moved on. I was 16 when my grandfather died and we had a good relationship, but it never really hit me. I didn't cry at his funeral or at all really. 2 years later, I was in senior English class which was broken into sections based on the semester. At the time, we were doing public speaking and we each had to find a passage from a book or periodical and read it aloud. I chose a story from Chicken Soup for the Soul about a man who everyone loved, who worked hard all his life, and had finally had the chance to buy a new red pickup. Immediately after buying the truck, the man was diagnosed with cancer, which spread rapidly. He passed away without ever having the chance to drive his new truck, a shell of the strong man he once was. This story nearly identical to my grandfather's and I thought it was a fitting tribute. I practiced reading the story out loud to get my timing down and had no problems. The day came and I stood up in front of my entire class and began to read. I suppose I should mention that my grandfather had been the janitor of my high school for over 30 years and everyone knew and loved him. Anyway, I got 2 paragraphs in and I looked up and saw everyone looking at me, hanging on this story, understanding its similarities. At this point, all the emotions I had never processed came flooding in and a giant lump grew in my throat. I tried to continue reading but just couldn't do it. I walked to the teacher's desk, placed my book down, and with tears streaming down my face, choked out that I couldn't do it and I excused myself from class. Being the typical macho sport playing guy I was embarrassed. I learned later that the teacher read the story out loud after I left and started crying herself. Having known my grandfather for years as well, I guess it wasn't really a bad place, but awkward nonetheless. I am tearing up right now in a Target bathroom stall after reading this if it makes you feel any better. The only public meltdown I've had was when I was in 7th grade. I was unpopular, overweight, and picked on by some of the more athletic and popular kids. There was one kid in one of my classes who generally wasn't a bully, but he was a smartass and one day he took things too far. We were joking around near the end of class and he started to poke fun at my man boobs, or, I guess, boy boobs. I tried my best to laugh it off but soon he started to give me titty twisters, or purple nurples as they're sometimes called. The first one was embarrassing and painful enough, and I kept trying to brush his hand away when he attempted more, but he managed to get 2 or 3 more in just before the bell rang. I just slumped over my desk and couldn't move because the pain was so much. He stood up and said, "Alright, see you later, Coil 1," and patted me on the back, not knowing I was in so much pain. I don't know if it was more embarrassment or the actual physical pain, but I lost it. I started crying like a little girl. I was very self-conscious about my weight, and I knew that everyone in class had seen him giving me titty twisters. I tried to walk out of the classroom unnoticed. A friend of mine, who was much more popular than I was, saw me crying in a courtyard full of students and took me into the bathroom, asking me if I was okay, what happened, and who did it. I tried my best to contain myself and regain my composure, but I just couldn't stop crying. I was too emotionally and physically hurt. At this point, a very popular member of the small group of Latino students came into the bathroom. Everybody liked this guy, and nobody fricked with him. I thought for sure he would have called me a little B for crying, and especially for crying over being bullied. To my surprise, he came up behind me and my friend and said, "Hey, Coil 1. I didn't think he'd know my name." What happened, man? After my friend told him the story, he told me, "Don't worry, Coil 1. That kid's freaking dead," and he stormed out of the bathroom. The next day the kid who gave me the titty twisters came running up to me begging me to call off the dogs. Felt good, man. 9 o'clock on Christmas Eve when I was 16, working in retail. 15 years ago, there was a line of people stretched way back into the store and only 2 cashiers, me being one of them. I'm at a regular cash register that is set up with very limited capabilities. Can only check people out. I can't perform any other functions even if I wanted to. Anything else, returns, exchanges, adjustments, has to be done at the customer service register, which is directly across from me and being run by the only other cashier, Dan. I'm doing everything I can to work as fast as possible. Tempers are short. I've been at work for a very long day. A lady comes through with a huge stack of stuff. I check her out. She pays. The transaction is closed. She steps to the end of the table, not moving her stuff, and goes through the entire receipt while I continue to try to check people out. She finds an error of $2 on the receipt that neither of us caught during the transaction. She demands a refund. I explain that I can't do adjustments from my register. She'll have to turn around and get Dan to do it at the customer service register. Dan is more than willing to fix it really fast. This is unacceptable to her. She starts berating me, yelling about how I'm an idiot, and how I will have to fix it. I will not pawn her off on someone else. If I wasn't 16 and had my wits about me, I probably would have handed her $2 the next time I could open the drawer and been done with it. I just stammered an apology and told her that I couldn't change her transaction. Only Dan could. She screamed a little more, gathered up her stuff, and stormed out. I was holding it together until the next customer, who had witnessed everything, patted my arm and said, "Don't let people get you down. You're doing a good job." I lost it, sobbing through the next 5-6 customers, checking them out, telling them Merry Christmas and sending them on their way, tears streaming down my face. Customer service during holiday season is freaking balls. My sincere condolences that you had to deal with that. Had a swollen lymph node in my neck for 3 months about 2 years ago. I was under a lot of stress since I had just gone to the doctor earlier that morning for an ultrasound of the area, as well as testing for tuberculosis and other diseases. I went into work, retail, and all was fine until after I came back from my meal break. I went to the register and this woman was rude right from the start. I greeted her with a "Hey, how are you today?" and she just said, "Get me that sweater in an extra small." There were sweaters hanging behind my register. I turned to grab one and realized I hadn't asked what color. "Which color, miss?" she replied with, "Why are you so freaking rude? Get me your manager." In shock and confusion, I used my walkie-talkie to call my manager up. She came to my register, saw my face and asked what was wrong. I just looked at her and said, "I honestly have no idea." The woman continued to rant on and on about how I needed to be fired, that she was going to call corporate, and how rude I was. I burst out in tears and shouted, "All I did was ask which color you wanted." Looking back now, I probably wouldn't have been so upset had I not been stressed out about my swollen lymph node. That lady was such a C. I hope that lady was kicked out. And by kicked out I mean punched in the trachea. I was giving blood. I had been working for a little over a month straight with not one day off. I finally had a day off and was getting various appointments out of the way, dentist, optometrist, etc. Ones which I hadn't been able to afford for a few years since I lost my insurance. I was squeezing giving blood into my day off since I finally had the opportunity. Well, the woman who I'm assuming is the supervisor, she is always barking orders at the other people there, decided my blood wasn't coming out fast enough, even though I was almost done, and she comes over and digs the goddamn needle all up in my arm. It really freaking hurt. I just started crying after that. It had been a long and stressful couple of weeks for me, what with working spring break by myself at my job, and having inconsiderate roommates that allowed at all hours of the night even though they know I work 12-hour days regularly and wake up really early. I think that's what did it. What? See, I don't say that word often but she really was to you. I hate needles and I am sure if I was you I would have decked her. Thanks BTW for your donation. I cry very easily when reading books or watching movies. I was about 16 and decided to watch The Kite Runner. I hadn't read the book so I had no idea what was coming. Afterwards I was standing in the bright neon light of the cinema, in the hallway, and my brother-in-law said something funny that made me lose it and I couldn't control myself anymore and I just started ugly crying. Like really ugly crying. It was a big cinema. I avoid books and movies that I know could cause public crying. But with it being a good day, I thought I was safe from the giving tree weeping. I am very glad you said Kite Runner was sad so it can be avoided. If you haven't seen it yet, avoid House of Sand and Fog like the plague. Frick that movie. I was on a date with this girl, and we both brought our younger siblings. We went to see Where the Wild Things Are. I was only one that lost it when Max says goodbye and everyone roars, and I was with 8-10-year-olds. I worked at a cell phone store and had a lady, probably about 25ish, come in asking for help. She said that she wanted to check someone else's voicemail and get a recording. I explained to her that we weren't allowed to do that, but if she knew the passcode she probably could get into it. We just couldn't do it for her. I thought it was a cheating husband situation or something. She started to cry and in a sobbing voice said, "No, I want a recording of his voicemail greeting. My husband died last week, and I want a recording of his voice. It's the only thing with his voice on it." I instantly started tearing up and sat her down and told her I would take care of it. I went into my office and shut the door, grabbed my phone and hers and dialed his number. I called his number about 5 times and it went to voicemail, and I started bawling hearing this dead young man's voice on the greeting. I finally got a good recording and saved it into her phone. I walked back out as she is still fighting back tears and showed her how to access it. She hugged me and left, which made me lose it. I started bawling, and at this point my employees are like, WTF is wrong, and I try to explain what happened and it makes me cry even more. I had to step outside to regain composure, and then I went into my office and proceeded to discount her bill to free. One of my best friends committed suicide last January, our senior year. His parents have left his voicemail up, and it's honestly one of the most comforting things in the world to call for me. Listening to him say that he'll call me right back, and telling him how much I miss him and how my life is going just like I used to call him to tell him what our plans were is so nice. I'm very thankful. As a former flight attendant, I was accustomed to people being jerks to me even though I am super nice. This one flight I asked a woman what she wanted to drink and handed her a napkin. She angrily snatched it out of my hand. Snatched? I asked if she was okay and she said, "What the heck is your problem?" I asked her nicely if I had done something to offend her because she was clearly aggravated. She told me to shut the heck up and get her a Coke. So I shut up and got her a Coke. The lady sitting in front of her stood up and said, and I am paraphrasing here, "Lady, you don't have the right to be a miserable bee to that woman. If I were her I'd have dumped that Coke into your fake Prada purse. Apologize to her now." And she did. It was the only time in 5 years of working on an aircraft that anyone ever stuck up for me. I started to sob in the galley after the service was over and gave my wonderful defender all the food and booze she wanted. I was a brand new nurse and I was taking care of a 3 or 4 year old who started going into pretty severe respiratory distress. had the potential of becoming a code blue situation. It was my first time in this kind of situation. I went to get a piece of equipment so I could give her a higher concentration of oxygen while another nurse stayed in the room with her. When I went into the utility room, I couldn't find the equipment anywhere and there was no one else around to ask for help. My anxiety got the best of me, and I burst into tears. Finally, another nurse came into the room, saw me crying and gave me a hug. We found the equipment. I wiped my tears and went back into super nurse mode. Ended up sending the patient to the ICU, but she was discharged a few days later. TLDR. Crying in the utility room while my patient is in severe respiratory distress. If scrubs taught me anything, it's that supply closets have more interns than supplies. I used to work at my college's library. My managers were nasty and we went through employees so fast. No one bothered to know one another. Most of my work was reshelving the books, so I was alone in the quiet, desolate floors of the building. I wasn't treated or diagnosed with depression yet, so I cried a lot while doing this. If I ran into someone else, I would go to the bathroom. There was a ladies' room on each floor, thank God, and hide in there and cry for a while. It also helped when my depression also triggered my IBS and I was stuck in the bathroom for maybe half an hour. Ironic thing was I was really fast and accurate at reshelving, so they had no idea that I was spending so much company time having meltdowns instead of shelving books. Disney World. We went for Christmas this year after losing our daughter 6 days after birth to trisomy 18. My husband and I couldn't stand a Christmas with everyone crying and pointing out what we were missing. We knew she wasn't there. It hurt us a lot. We had never spent a Christmas away, and my mother and family made me feel very bad about leaving and used my grandfather's illness to make me feel worse. He ended up being in the hospital anyway, and they didn't even celebrate. Plus he understood and wanted us to be happy. We were watching a stage show about dreams coming true and I just lost it. I tried to hide it, as it was packed and there were so many kids around, but the tears were flowing freely. It hurt to hear about dreams coming true when I had lost mine. I also cried my way through the candlelight concert. It was the Christmas story and was beautiful, but the song Silent Night especially hurt because it was all about mother and child. There was a little baby there who looked a lot like my little girl too. Big brown eyes and brown hair, and it just crushed something inside me. We did have a nice vacation, and I'm sure it would be better than being home. But it was just very hard when I had so many hopes and dreams for my first Christmas with my first child. Some moments I could escape thinking about it all, and sometimes it was just too much being in a place I really wanted to share with my little girl. It especially hurt since when we went to Disney on our honeymoon I told my husband that the next time we went we would have had a kid. Yeah, I hate it when I'm right. We are expect a baby this December. I got pregnant 6 months after losing my daughter and it was planned. This baby looks good and we found out Essie has a 1 in 100,000 chance of having the same genetic disorder, so we are very hopeful. We find out the baby's sex in a month and I can't wait. I miss my daughter every day and no one and nothing can replace her. But she showed us a love like we had never known and really showed us how much we wanted a family. I have bad endometriosis, and waiting could mean losing the chance to have kids, so as soon as the doctors cleared us, and we asked our therapist for good measure, we decided to go for it. We are really happy. Oh my god, my heart breaks thinking about your loss. This story made me tear up. I can't imagine the pain of losing a child you two were so excited to have. Congratulations on your new baby. It's wonderful to hear that the baby is healthy. I work as a unit nurse at a nursing home rehab. There was a terrible snowstorm so I had to stay my regular shift, 11 PM to 7 AM, plus the 7 AM to 3 PM shift. We were dangerously understaffed. It was only myself and 3 CNAs to a 40-bed unit. I was so overwhelmed with being in charge of this whole unit with only 3 other people at my side. Having my residents be fed, having their daily needs taken care of and getting their medications on time. I started crying hysterically while giving out meds. A few of my little old ladies huddled around me with their wheelchairs, held my hand and told me it was okay and I was doing the best I could. It really helped me feel better but I felt so useless in front of them. I'm supposed to be taking care of them but here they are consoling me. I really love my residents. I used to work at Ross. and I was 1/2 months pregnant at the time. It was an awful pregnancy. I was in and out of the doctors every week, and my work kept sending me home because they said I looked severely sick. Anyways, I was up in customer service. No one wanted to let me go take a break and I needed food so bad I was shaking. Finally they said I can go to break after one last customer. He walks up and places 3 little statues he wants to buy on the counter. I ring him up and start to put the statues in a bag. They kinda hit the counter hard but not nearly as hard for them to break. The guy then starts to mumble stuff like, well, I don't want to fricking buy them if they are broken, you stupid fricking girl. I just ignore it so I can go to break. I then lift the bag for him and they kinda clang together. Again starts mumbling and cussing. He then wads up his money and throws it at my face. I just had my head down with tears strolling down and handed him his change and went to the break room, put my head on the table, and cried for my whole break. Man, that story turned really sad. Sorry. If that a shat saw that he made you cry like that and didn't apologize, then I hope his hemorrhoids grow tentacles that slap his balls anytime he tries to have a conversation with someone. My mother asked me, where did you put the can opener, as my father closed the back door to the house louder than usual. The worst assault my unit received in Iraq started with a 19-year-old kid asking me, sir, where is the can opener, followed by him getting blown into little tiny pieces. I spent another 3 years in the AOR after that. I proceeded to break down like a 5-year-old bee. On top of this, my oldest sister, who had been happily married 7 years, just broke the news to our family that her husband was cheating on her and they were getting divorced. OBTW. It was the 25th of December. God freaking damn it. I need a drink. Holy frick, dude. Yes, you do. Hug and hugs. My god. You need a lot of hugs. Also potentially a dog. Or a cat. Or something snuggly. This exact same thing happened when I was in 5th grade. Our class had to finish reading Where the Red Fern Grows because our teacher couldn't keep it together. That is one of the saddest books I have ever read. I was on a first date with a guy I was really interested in. Halfway through dinner, I got a text, my dog died. Instant waterworks. Date ended. Never spoke again. He didn't like animals anyway. Frick him. Even if I couldn't relate to the cause of someone being upset, I would show empathy for their distress. You know, unless it was because their Hilter Youth rally got cancelled or something. This probably wasn't the worst place, but it's what first came to mind. Over this past spring break, I went home with my boyfriend to meet his mother for the first time. She has a different sense of humor. I never could quite tell if she was joking around or if she actually hated me. It was so unlike what my own mother is like. I was very unnerved. One night, she told my boyfriend and I to go to her elderly neighbor's house to help them move furniture around. We gladly complied. I was kneeling on the floor putting books in boxes when a huge wooden bookcase fell right on my head. It didn't really hurt, probably because of the rush of adrenaline, but because of the shock. It took me about 20 seconds to catch my breath before the tears started pouring down my face. I was trying to tell everyone not to worry. It was okay. No, it wasn't your fault. I'll be fine. While simultaneously sobbing and gasping for breath, I sat down with a bottle of water and an ice pack that the neighbor's wife gave me and recovered for a couple minutes. Within 10 minutes I was up and at them again, packing boxes, moving them to the garage, helping to move furniture, etc. I was genuinely worried that I might have a concussion because I suddenly felt sleepy and loopy, but I kept on trucking. They needed our help, and they were truly lovely people. Later that night, my boyfriend's mom reminded him that we were going to dinner with family the next evening and to bring the crybaby along. I have never been so freaking furious. I happily helped her friends to move houses on my vacation. I was injured and yet I still sucked it up within 10 minutes and continued to help as if nothing was wrong at all. And she had the nerve to call me a crybaby? She made several jabs at me over the course of the week, pointing out that my boyfriend's high school girlfriend was at her peak when he dated her, calling me a crybaby several more times, etc. My boyfriend continues to insist that she really likes me, and apparently that's just her sense of humor. It's just not a sense of humor I understand. Your boyfriend's mom is an butthole. That woman might use the excuse as that's my sense of humor. Deal with it. But the truth is that she's a bee and that's the easiest way she's found to make people put up with her crap. Next time you go to her house to visit, leave an upper decker in her toilet because frick her. The vet. My 17-year-old cat was very sick, and being the 18-year-old tough guy, I thought I'd take my mother and 2 sisters to the vet to say goodbye to our cat. I had no idea what I was in for. Whilst waiting in the waiting room, because that's what you do, my mom starts crying. Not seeing my mom cry very often, this was unsettling. So I asked what the heck. She said she was sorry, blah blah blah. Then we go into the procedure room, and mom starts crying again. Jesus mom, again? I thought you didn't even like the cat. With the cat on the table, we are all petting her, and the vet doctor, whoever the frick puts animals down, came in. Okay, we're just going to give her a quick needle and she's dead. With that I saw the saddest thing I will never be able to unsee in my life. My cat of 17 years of my life go limp. Dead. My mom and 2 sisters wailing around it, hugging each other, and me standing in the same spot from when I entered the room by myself. Feeling a rush of the most horrid sadness come over me, I started bawling. The most uncontrollable cry I've ever had. On the way out, the receptionist says it's so nice to see a young man show his emotions like this. Don't ever try to hide it. Thanks lady, I haven't cried since. I was in a school assembly. It was a super serious assembly about bullying. A guy, I forgot his name, was there speaking about Stand for the Silent, which is a group to prevent bullying in schools. He told the story about his son, who died by suicide. Nobody was speaking at all or making any kind of noises. What broke me was when he said, when his mom went to his school to pick up his books, she heard some kids making jokes about him. I started bawling my eyes out. You see Reddit, I have had suicidal thoughts before. Before I started crying I was thinking the whole entire time if this had been me, I couldn't handle the stress on my mind about that. I was crying so much that the speaker came over and asked if I was okay, which made me cry harder. The only thing good about this is one of my best friends was next to me and he comforted me and handed me tissues. He is one of 2 people that know about my past suicidal thoughts. It was so embarrassing because everyone was looking at me like I was an alien with 5 heads, and my crush was 1 row above me watching the whole thing. The good thing is no one asking why I started crying so hard. Thanks for listening Reddit. Anytime, man. Anytime. 2 stories. 1. I worked in an office in undergrad where I wasn't allowed to leave. I had just started dating a guy and his ex-girlfriend of 8 months, previously my best friend, came into my office and started yelling at me about how I was a terrible friend and person, etc., etc. I started crying more because I was embarrassed that she had trapped me at work than because of what she said. 2. I worked retail and my manager was stressed out, so he was telling me I was doing everything wrong and not letting me ask questions. I started crying. Thankfully, my face doesn't get red when I cry, so none of the 10 customers who then walked in noticed I was upset. When I was in 8th grade, I started selling candy out of my locker to make money. I was dang good at it, too. Well, such things weren't allowed in my middle school, and I had the principal go into my backpack in the middle of class and take my huge bag of candy. Being in 8th grade, I burst out crying and swore that I wasn't selling it and that I just wanted something to suck on during class. Yay, that was 4 years ago. Still living it down. I bawled my eyes out this past Saturday as we had to put my little ferret down. I was holding my baby boy in my arms, and the vet stuck him with a needle, and I held his little limp body until I heard him breathe his last breath. Seeing his little pink paw pads turn purple and feeling how heavy and lifeless the body was too much for me. Oh, that's not a terrible place to burst into tears. A bit awkward, but the kids seem sweet, and I can't imagine any parent who would object to a teacher tearing up while reading their kindergarten The Giving Tree. This January my grandfather passed away. In February my boyfriend and I went to see The Grey. I'm already an easy crier at movies, and towards the end of the movie when you find out his wife actually died, she didn't leave him. Spoiler. I started crying. Then came the heart-wrenching scene with the wallets. Spoiler. I couldn't help it. I was overwhelmed with all the death in the movie and thoughts of my grandpa, and I started sobbing in the middle of the theater. Thankfully it was the end of the movie. My boyfriend helped me back to his car and I didn't fully stop crying for over an hour. It was the first time I'd cried that hard about the whole ordeal. I just felt silly thinking about the other people in the theater seeing this girl absolutely lose it over just a movie. I absolutely loved that book. Oh yay. And every dang time I watch Extreme Home Makeover and they explain their situation, I cry. The father lost his job at the peanut deshelling plant just shortly after their youngest child was born inside out. The day my grandfather died was the beginning of the second week of my internship in New York City. My parents decided that they would wait for me to get home before telling me about my pop, but my wonderful cousins decided it was absolutely imperative that they post about it on Facebook. I read it when I was walking from my office to Penn Station. So there I am in the midst of absolute hysterics standing in the middle of Herald Square and I still had at least a 30-minute train ride to go. I had a single napkin on me that I used to wipe my tears and the snot that was absolutely pouring out of my nose. The train I took went right by my pop's favorite restaurant, so that didn't help the situation at all. I left my sunglasses on the whole ride, but it was pretty obvious that I was silently sobbing the entire time. When I got home I ran right up to my bedroom and finally let loose to get it all out of my system. I don't know who was more angry at my cousins after it all, myself or my parents. My pop was also a retired member of the NYPD and fought in World War II, so at his wake they had a bagpiper come in and play Amazing Grace. This past year I was in a bar on St. Patrick's Day when a bunch of bagpipers came in and clearly decided to play Amazing Grace. Cue auto tears. I can't even stop it. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.